In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I'm going to do this video. I really didn't want to do it. I was hoping I would never have to do it. To try and clear up some of the confusion that we see about, it's just so confusing, to a lot of people about what we see happening in the church, in the magisterium, in the world. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be confusing at all. And so I want to try to clear some of that up and share some things with you, personal things with you, and expose some things that I think are diabolic. Now, I will be the first to say that this is, me doing this, that is really just out of concern for the viewers being confused. Okay, and so I'm not an investigative reporter. I don't go looking into, stories and digging up, everything you can find wrong with the church and, things like that. I see headlines here and there, which were confusing to me until I began to start looking into some of this. And that's where the exposing was going to happen. And I have an obligation to do that. I'm going to stick with what my pastor had told me in regards to seers and that kind of thing. That as a lay person, that if I could show, or I noticed red flags, that I had an obligation to warn the faithful about that. And so I did. I warned some of the clergy who have sent letters pointing out contradictions, distortions of Scripture, and things of that nature. Now, this is a little different in the sense that it has to do with lay people within the church. And I've noticed a pattern. And again, as I said, it's a little disturbing. And I wouldn't have noticed it. I don't think I would have noticed it had I not started looking into some of this stuff. Which, to be honest with you, I really, really don't have the time to do. This is not my area of expertise. I'm not an investigative reporter. I just don't have the time to do it. I have responsibilities. I need to go to work. I need to continue my prayer life. I need to make reparation, to do penance for the sins of the world and the church, and to really focus on what God is calling me to do. And I've tried to drive this point home over and over and over again, how important it is not to get caught up in the fray and to not spend time, the majority of your time, reading news articles or listening to, crazy people on the internet that are, pushing an agenda and, planting seeds of doubt. On top of all that, I do, how would I say, I have to have a little time to try and find someone compatible to take out the dinner. And I don't know, in this world, I think I might be I might have a little better luck just going to a bar and trying to convert a pretty pagan, to be honest with you. So I don't have a lot of time to do this. I believe that I can offer some clarity on what we see happening. I will say that I woke up to the news this morning about Bishop Strickland, which it saddened me very much. I like Bishop Strickland, and those that know me personally, that I've spoken with, either over the phone or email or whatever, they know I have great respect for Bishop Strickland. They also know that Tyler, Texas, was one of the places that I was thinking of relocating to, and that had a lot to do with it. So I'm hurt by this. I'm not surprised by it. Okay, but again, I think there's an agenda here, and there's something diabolical about it, I believe. I find it ironic that I believe it was in the last video that I did, or the one before that, I spoke about civil war in the church. With the news of Bishop Strickland this morning, there were a number of things, other things that I looked at to see the responses. And again, coincidentally, call it a coincidence if you want, these very same people are saying the civil war has begun in the church. Okay? This is the beginning of the great apostasy. That's what we're watching. The problem that I have with some of the things that I've seen is that there seems to be an agenda being pushed in that direction. Now, whether these people realize what they're doing or not, I have no idea. I only know what I hear and what I see and what I read. And again, as a faithful Catholic, I have an obligation to point out contradictions. Okay? So I will say that I'm still, a little surprised that nothing's been done with the bishops in Germany. I mean, as far as I know. So, like I say, it is a little confusing even for me. I think that the ones on the left that are snubbing their nose at the Pope and blessing same-sex unions, should be reprimanded as well. Okay. But we have to stay prayerful. We have to stay obedient to the magisterium. We have to stay faithful to church doctrine, because I believe that these things are going to get a lot worse. And so with that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these on the far right as well as on the far left. Okay. Now, and again, I was really, how do I say, I'm kind of naive, I guess. Either that or kind of uninformed, because again, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about all this. That's not what Our Lady called us to do. Our Lady called us to prayer. Our Lady's called us to penance. Our Lady has called us to peace. And if you spend too much time looking at these things, I have to keep reiterating this. I don't know why. If you keep looking at these things, whether they be messages from all these seers about doom and gloom, or this is going to happen or that's going to happen, you're going to lose your peace. If you spend too much time in the news, you're going to lose your peace. The majority of our time needs to be spent, as I said, taking care of our personal responsibilities, our vocations as given to us by God, and in prayer. The Rosary, the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, Eucharist, confession, Scripture, fasting, and penance. If we do that, you're not going to fall into this stuff. Okay, so I can't. It's frustrating for me to have to keep saying this, and because if we are not in prayer, we are not going to be able to discern, and discernment is going to be a key thing here. Okay, so I did do a video I wasn't Pope-splaining, I was Vin-splaining. And, I want to make it clear, again, there are things that Pope Francis does that I find very confusing, things that he does that, I'm not sure I even really agree with. But all of that is irrelevant, okay? What I want to do is to give you facts, and these are facts, okay? Bishop Strickland's been removed, and nothing has been done about the German bishops. That's a little confusing to me. I don't understand. On the other hand, no one on the far left has read a letter like Bishop Strickland did. I don't think Bishop Strickland should have read that letter, and I think that I'm really getting a sense that maybe he was prodded, or maybe pushed in the direction of sharing that letter. I don't think it was from him. I don't think he read it. I think somebody influenced him into sharing that letter. But again, I could be wrong. I will say this, that the Pope seems to me to push things as far as he possibly can without going over the boundary of teaching heresy or changing doctrine. Okay, in the area of this LGTB thing. Okay, I would also say that in fairness to Pope Francis, that from day one he has been attacked over and over and over again, ruthlessly attacked by far right radical traditionalists, laymen. Okay, Taylor Marshall is one of them. John Henry Weston is another one of them. Kennedy Hall. And again, so it's like I say, they say they're fighting for the faith, but they constantly attack the church. And I'm not defending the left in any way. The left were cheering and jeering and thought all these things were going to happen with women deacons and women priests and blessing same-sex unions leading up to this synod, only to walk away with their heads hung down and completely disappointed that none of it happened. On the other side, you have all of a sudden on these other news outlets or whatever, there's no news about that. All there is the next scandal, this, that, the other, continuing to plant seeds of doubt, and basically clickbait. That's what it seems like to me. Okay, and I will say this: I looked into how much money these people actually make, and they make a lot of money. But you never get anywhere with them. There's never any conclusion or solution, or it's just this constant bombardment of how bad Pope Francis is. Okay, and as I said before, we've had good popes, we've had bad popes. Personally, Pope Francis is a little liberal for me. Okay, I'm used to more conservative popes that have an open mind, like John Paul. Something that I've noticed is in questioning the election of Pope Francis, a lot of these people that have been doing that will call Pope Francis the Pope when it's convenient for them to call him the Pope. Okay, many of these people do not believe that Vatican II was a legitimate council. Therefore, the new Mass, the Novus Ordo Mass, is not a valid Mass, which in turn would mean that the Eucharist is not the Eucharist. Which that's a big problem. That's a huge problem. They won't come out outright and say it, but this is, I believe, what they believe. And again, that's what happens when people are radicalized. It's why it's so important to stay in the middle of the boat. People on the far left and on the far right are already falling off the boat. There are bishops in Germany that are falling off the boat. There are people on the far right that are falling off the boat, now calling for civil war. I have heard this, literally heard this come out of the mouth of a priest. When you go back to the beginning, and I don't pay a lot of attention to this kind of thing, but this is just what I've seen. Okay, was one of the first things that I heard was the Pope saying, "Who am I to judge?" Okay, I was confused by that. I didn't go digging, I didn't go looking, I just kept praying. That's what I do. And but it wasn't until recently that I began to start going back and looking up these statements, that we shouldn't breed like rabbits. I've said that. You guys know this because I've done a video where I said I was really hurt by this until recently when I started to go back and listen to what the Pope actually said. And so I myself was, how would I say, somewhat deceived by these people on the far right that were saying this and out of naivety, okay, in not understanding radical traditional Catholics and radical left-leaning Catholics of how radical this is and the extent that they will go to promote this agenda or their agenda. I was caught off guard by it. I thought these people can't be trusted on either side. They cannot be trusted because their reporting is biased, and they twist words, they take out words, they insert words, and to promote their agenda. That's what they're doing, and so it's not helping at all. That's why turn this stuff off. Don't listen to it because they're causing more trouble, more harm than they are doing good. Now, I believe wholeheartedly they believe they're fighting for a just cause, but it's the way that they're going about it that is very telling. So I will say that Pope Francis has been attacked by the far right from day one. Okay. With that being said, the far left was, basically throwing a celebration that every mass was going to have a rainbow flag on the altar, and so there's these two factions within the church that are pushing things that are not Catholic. Okay, but I will say this: at least on the left, you know where they're coming from. I mean, they don't hide it. They don't hide what they're doing. They don't hide what they want to do. They don't, they just do it. What I've noticed on the far right is something a little more, how would I say, deceiving. And I want to get into that a little bit because it's really important. Like I say, it's causing a lot of confusion. And so I'm gonna talk a little bit about that, and then I'm gonna go into what we actually see happening in front of us, which is not a good thing. I'm sorry, I'm looking at these notes. I'm trying to get everything in order here. This is not an easy thing for me to do. Again, it's not my area of expertise, but it's really disturbing. And I do have an obligation to tell you. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but in the video of Bishop Strickland sharing this letter, in the background you can see a great big sign that says LifeSite. So this was a LifeSite news event, okay, in which this letter was shared. And again, I don't think I'm sensing that the bishop may have been, again, prodded in a way to share this letter. I don't think he just wanted. I don't think he would have done it outright. I can't imagine that. I think he was influenced in some way to share this, and maybe given how do I say shown some things in which they think that, because there's another aspect to this, they think they're putting prophecy together. Okay, and I have something else that I've noticed, that they've done videos on Garabandal, they've done videos on the Warning, they've done interviews and talked about prophecy in the church, and so they think that they're figuring all this out when they're missing a part of it, and that may have had something to do with this. I can't say for sure, but that's what I'm sensing. This was a LifeSite news event that Bishop Strickland read this letter, and knowing full well that if he read that letter, he would be removed as a bishop. I don't think anyone would question that. Okay. I recently saw an interview that was done later in which John Henry Weston was interviewing Bishop Schneider, and in talking about the election of Pope Francis, the validity of it, brought in the scripture verse, the abomination of desolation, only to be gently corrected by Bishop Snyder, who said, again, Pope Francis is the Pope. He warned about being too aggressive. And again, he was gently corrected. But these people turn right around and don't listen to the very bishop that they're interviewing, the bishops that they would say, that they like, that they agree with, that are on their side. They turn right around and then start to do stories planting seeds of doubt about the election of Pope Francis. So they don't even listen to the bishop. They don't even listen to the bishop. Think about that. They don't listen to the bishop that they're interviewing. Bishop Snyder corrected him very gently. And, he said in the interview that he prays for this pope more than any pope he's ever prayed for. I can relate with that. I've prayed for Pope Francis more than any pope I have ever prayed for in my life. Every single day I have prayed for the Pope. He has been in my intentions, as have you. I found it kind of interesting that the letter that was read by Bishop Strickland, again from a quote-unquote friend, talked about the election of Pope Francis, that Pope Francis was a usurper. It basically said he was the Antichrist. And then a few days later, or a week later, of me seeing this video, I see another video of John Henry Weston basically it seemed to me trying to influence or to get Bishop Schneider to say that Pope Francis was a usurper and the abomination of desolation. And it was at a LifeSite news event that Bishop Strickland read this letter. Okay, LifeSite News is also the news agency, the Catholic news agency that sat on a interview in which the Vatican was trying to clarify and clear up any confusion about blessing same-sex unions, that it was never going to happen. They buried that interview for 3 weeks while they continued to promote the idea that somehow the synod was going to give way to blessing same-sex unions and maybe even calling it marriage. That is deceptive. That is deceptive. Now keep in mind that they got to get the thumbs up, they got to get the subscribers, they got to get the viewers, they got to get the support. And this is why I say it's clickbait over and over and over and over and over again. How can we trust a Catholic news agency that would do this when we don't trust our own mainstream media in the United States that seems to be doing the exact same thing? And this is what I mean by diabolical. They have an agenda. They want to paint this Pope as bad as they possibly can. Okay, now again, I'm not defending some of the things that Pope Francis does. I'm not defending the Pope in any way. All I'm doing is giving you the facts. This is what I have found. And, God knows that I would not give you something that isn't true. And I wouldn't do this if I didn't feel I had an obligation. That news agency cannot be trusted. Okay, that I'm absolutely convinced of it. They can't be trusted. Okay? And so I, again, pray for Bishop Strickland. Please pray for him, because I believe he is a good man, a good bishop, a faithful bishop. And I believe that he may have been influenced into reading that letter. And if the friend, and I'm saying if, this is a big if the friend that influenced him into reading that letter did that, and the bishop did it probably against better judgment, that friend knew exactly what would happen to Bishop Strickland if he read it. And now they're decrying that Bishop Strickland has been removed, and they're calling for civil war in the church. And many of these people that are saying these things don't know these two facts that I just gave you. They don't know about Bishop reading that letter. They don't know about the interview with Bishop Snyder in which John Henry Weston alluded to, very subtly alluded to that the election of Pope Francis was invalid and that he was the abomination of desolation. Basically, you have the exact same message coming from the same news agency from two different people. And this is a news agency, again, that buried a story concerning the blessing of same-sex unions that was done, I believe, with Cardinal Fuller, in which the Vatican was trying to clear up any confusion. So instead of helping to clear up the confusion, they buried the story and then kept promoting the idea that Pope Francis was going to bless same-sex unions. That's not honest. That's not honest. That's being dishonest to promote an agenda in the name of defending the church when you're actually creating more chaos in the church. And if I'm discerning this correctly, you just had one of the best bishops, because of your actions, you've had one of the best bishops in the United States removed. So congratulations. Okay, and they'll use this as just as another thing to promote their agenda and say how bad Pope Francis is. Now, again, in all fairness, I think some of the German bishops, and it's just my opinion, probably should have been reprimanded, if not removed, as well. Okay, and they haven't been. But when I get into this towards the end, I think maybe we'll see why. Okay. Taylor Marshall, from day one, has attacked the Pope. And I like Taylor Marshall. I think he's a smart guy. I think his heart is in the right place. I think he truly loves the church. But I don't believe that he sees Vatican II as a valid council. I think that he seems to me to want to be able to check every single box to make sure he doesn't go to hell. Because coming from being an Episcopal priest and admittedly a self-proclaimed heretic, coming into the church, he wants to make sure everything's right. But there's things that he's done as well that have been deceptive, and I hate to say that. I like Taylor Marshall. I think he's a smart guy. I think some of the things that he's done are good. I think he would have a lot more to offer if he would get off this whole radical boat, because it's not good. He's attacked the Pope from day one. It's something that I noticed, and I was kind of new to his stuff, but something that I've noticed in watching him over the years is that he continually finds everything possibly bad that you can find about the church. The worst possible example of a Novus Ordo Mass is what he promotes on his channel, knowing full well that this isn't the norm. And it's never balanced. It's always one-sided. And it's in the name of return to tradition. And it's just, he's planted seeds of doubt as well about the election of Pope Francis. Even when Pope Benedict, reiterated that Francis is Pope. He did an interview with Glenn Beck in which he was talking about Garabandal and the fulfillment of Catholic prophecy in the church. In that interview, he inserted a word into Our Lady's mouth that she didn't say concerning the synod, and the word was bad. That Our Lady said there would be a bad synod. That's not true. And he's familiar with Garabandal. He's familiar, I believe, with the book The Warning. But that, again, that is deceptive. Because people that aren't familiar with Garabandal may not even know that Garabandal has not yet been approved, nor has it been condemned. They just listen and respect the man. they now believe that Our Lady of Garabandal prophesied that there would be a bad synod, when in fact she never said that. In another interview that he did with someone that is familiar with Garabandal, he said that if the Pope goes to Russia, I'm a believer. Okay? In that statement, if the Pope goes to Russia, I'm a believer. So in that setting, he referred to Pope Francis as the Pope. In other videos, the first words out of his mouth is Pope Francis the Pope. So, and I don't know that they even understand or know that they're doing this, okay? But this is what's happening. They contradict themselves. I don't know if they're doing it on purpose. What I can say is they are completely contradicting themselves. Okay, so the Pope is only the Pope when it's convenient. And this is going to get a lot worse. But a lot of it has been promoted. It's been pushed in planting seeds of doubt. And in all fairness, I will say that Pope Francis and a lot of the things that he says could be more clear. He could just be very clear from the beginning. Okay, so it's kind of it's kind of coming from both sides in that sense. Okay, but I don't. The one thing I cannot stand is dishonesty. And putting a word in Our Lady's mouth is dishonest. It's not honest. And so again, how can you trust that? You can't. You can't trust it. Especially when it's coming from people that obviously have an agenda to do away with the Novus Ordo Mass, do away with an entire council, and return to tradition. That's their answer to everything. I pointed this out before. Saint Faustina was given her revelations from Jesus when no other Mass was being said but the traditional Latin Mass, in which he told her that people are irreverent, that they treat him as a dead object. In other words, they don't believe in the real presence. This is in Faustina's time. So returning to tradition isn't the answer. Faith is the answer. Preaching the gospel in all truth without compromise is the answer. I pointed out a number of times that the Catechism teaches that heresy, schism, and apostasy are the fruits of sin in the church. And so we shouldn't be surprised at what we see happening in the church if you look back just from the 60s and 70s forward. And so again, a lot of these people want to blame it on Vatican II. It's not Vatican II. There were some things inserted into Vatican II that had nothing to do with the council. But it's sin. That's what causes apostasy. And so instead of everyone focusing, it would seem to me anyway, the antidote to that would to do deep self-reflection, to do deep self-examination of conscience of every single person in the church individually, trying to live the gospel and trying to live what the church teaches and trying to become more holy by God's grace. That is how you fight against it. But they're too busy biting each other. They're too busy attacking one another. They're too busy planting seeds of doubt in the magisterium. They are now calling for civil war, which again, I don't know how this happens to me, but I say things and then all of a sudden they happen. People start saying it. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that there are contradictions on both sides, and that's really what you have to listen for. And this is really the reason to stay in the middle of the boat. With the far, far left, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that is, rational thinker knows that we can't go there. We can't go against the doctrine and what the church teaches. In the same vein, those that are thinking clearly, you have to ask yourself, how can you trust people who are outright lying, changing words of the Blessed Mother, see the Pope as the Pope only when it's convenient, say they believe in only an authentic, approved apparition within the church, or private revelation within the church, when Elizabeth Kindleman is approved and says that at the triumph the fruits of Vatican II will explode, yet you continually blame what you see as an invalid counsel that has ruined the church. This is what I mean by contradiction. They contradict themselves in their own statements. And I don't even know that they're doing it. But you can't trust people like that. Okay? And especially the ones that have an agenda. And there is an obvious agenda here on this side. There's something very diabolical about this. And as I move on here, I think you guys are going to see the diabolic. Okay? And I'll move into that part now. What I meant when I had said that we're watching prophecy being fulfilled right in front of us, I meant exactly what I said. Apostasy, schism is due to sin. Apostasy, sin, and heresy, or apostasy, schism, and heresy, according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, are due to sin within the church. And what do we see happening? We see apostasy, we see schism, we see people breaking. This is what's going to happen, is you're going to see the church break into two camps. Okay, this was prophesied by Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. In Akita, I believe it was Akita, Our Lady said that the work of Satan will enter into the church in such a way that you will see bishop against bishop, cardinal against cardinal, and priest against priest. The work of Satan will infiltrate or enter the church in such a way that one will see cardinal opposing cardinal and bishop opposing bishop. And that's what we see happening now. The problem is that everyone wants to point the finger. This is seemingly, to me, the problem, is that they don't realize they're actually cooperating with Satan. They continually, what's happening is they're pointing their fingers at each other. They're getting in these arguments. They're taking sides without standing back and seeing the big picture and realizing that apostasy and schism and heresy are due to sin in the church, first and foremost. And secondly, according to Our Lady of Akita, this is the work of Satan. I've talked about this before. It is one of the easiest ways to discern the presence of the devil is when you see division. So I don't think it should surprise anyone. If there's any confusion about this anymore, there shouldn't be. Okay? And if there is, I'm going to try and clarify that right now. The work of Satan has entered the church. And that's why we see bishop against bishop, cardinal against cardinal, and priest against priest. Now, with that being said, there are some in the far right that are fomenting this. That's not good either. There are some on the far left that are fomenting this. That's not good either. And it's why it's so important to stay in the middle of the boat. It's why it is so important in this time of great darkness and confusion to pray, to spend the majority of the time in prayer. If you do this, you will keep your peace. If you do this, you will see what's happening in the church for what it is, and that is the work of the devil. The doctrine in the church has not changed. So if you hear these news agencies or these people saying he changed doctrine or this, that, or the other, don't believe it. Until that actually happens, don't believe it. And if that does actually happen, that would be a cause for great concern. Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich prophesied about two popes. I'll point out another contradiction. These people openly say that all they believe in is authentic, approved prophecy and apparitions in the church, which Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich is one of them. She plainly says she saw two popes. It was a scene of a great tribulation in the church, which I believe we are in now. Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich did not say that one was the pope and one was not the pope. She did not say that there was one good pope and one bad pope. So these people that are looking at this prophecy, which they have, as being fulfilled with Pope Benedict and Pope Francis, would have to admit in their own words, when they say that they accept authentic private revelation in the church and only believe that, would have to say that Pope Francis is the Pope, which again would make you question, why then would you go on the internet or on your YouTube channel or on your news agency and question the election of the Pope? It doesn't make any sense, and this is a contradiction. And again, I don't know if they're doing it on purpose. I don't know if they even realize they're doing it, but that's what they're doing. They're contradicting themselves in their own statements. One of the things I would say to look for is Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich had prophesied that there was a demand of the clergy that could not be, or a concession demanded of the clergy that could not be given. Okay, and so that would be something I believe that you would watch for. And it could come from one side or the other. What she prophesied was that the church would split into two camps. Okay, that's schism. That's apostasy. It's a great apostasy, and that's where we're headed. They're already calling that they're saying with the removal of Bishop Strickland, they are saying the civil war has begun. They're talking about resisting the Pope. They're talking about if you don't defend the church, you're not going to have a church. And there's some, I don't want to say some truth to that. There are powers within the church, or people within the church, that want to do her harm. There's no question about that. It's Masonic. It's communist. It's Marxist. Okay. Whether or not Pope Francis is tied to all of that, I haven't seen any proof of it. Some of the claims these people make about Pope Francis are just statements that are thrown out there. Like I said, with John Henry Weston, very subtly, it seemed to me that he was trying to get Bishop Snyder to say the exact same thing that was said in the letter that Bishop Strickland read. And the bishop corrected him very gently, but corrected him. Okay, Pope Francis is the Pope. So oh yes, Bishop. Well, thank you for your time. And that it's just so, I don't understand what these people are doing. Again, there's something very diabolical about it. Okay, and I don't have any other way to discern this. When we're never closer to Satan than when we lie, and that's what these people have done. They have done so in a very subtle way, but they they have not been honest. They have not been honest. Whether it's the words of Our Lady of Garabandal, or whether it is, covering up interviews that the Vatican gave this news agency to clear up some of the confusion. And again, I'm not sitting here defending Pope Francis. There's things, like I said, things he does that I don't understand. But who am I to judge the Pope? We are to pray for the Pope. We are to pray for the clergy. That's what we're called to do. We're called to defend the faith. But when you're constantly undermining the chair of Peter, you're not doing that. Okay? And so I'm going to get into this a little bit with what I was shown. And I'm going to, again, to clear up the confusion. I'm not confused about this at all. I know exactly what's happening. I honestly believe I know exactly where it's going. Again, this is my interpretation. Which basically means nothing, because inevitably the people that interpret these things are the clergy. Not only their authenticity, but their meaning. Okay? But I will share how I understand it. The Lord was showing me future events concerning a great tribulation in the world, which shook the depths of my soul. Transfixed, I saw the coming world war, a nuclear exchange between world powers, great social unrest, worldwide chaos, people possessed by Satan, future chastisements. Mankind, by his own actions, bringing itself to the very point of extinction, leaving a remnant. I saw the infiltration of the church by those in league with Lucifer, a massive persecution of the church from within and without, with priests being murdered, churches being sacked and burned, and the Eucharist trampled and profaned by soldiers with faces of death. Okay, so the infiltration of the church by those in league with Lucifer, a massive persecution of the church from within and from without. I've said before that the greatest persecutions of the church will come from those within the church. From those within the church that want to do her harm. It echoes the words of the Lord himself. Brother will hand over brother to death. The church will be betrayed in the same way that Jesus was betrayed by his own people. I've said before, it wouldn't surprise me a bit if these people grab the levers of power for a period. Okay, that wouldn't be the church. This was, I think I've shared this before on the YouTube channel, a message from Mary, but I've never given my interpretation of it. So I'm going to give you my interpretation of this. And a lot of it was confirmed after the fact, when I began to read things like Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich or Anna Marie Taiji, Akita. Okay. I saw a stone wall with 3 arches. On the wall itself there was in writing, the letters were hieroglyphic. I could not read the writing, but was made to know their meaning, a monument to the rich. Okay, I understand this to be the globalist influence in the church. The wall marked the entrance to a great city, although small in size. I understand the city to be Vatican City. I do not know what the phrase means. I was only given what the phrase was. Okay, so at the time I didn't understand what it meant. I believe I do now. I was then taken beyond the entrance, and I felt as though I was being led by someone, but I did not know who. I only sensed a very comforting presence with me. very gentle in nature. Beyond the wall, I was led down a winding path. The path was paved, but somehow different. It seemed very smooth, and it was narrow. There were hills and green grass with trees from place to place. I will say that I remember that some of these trees had fruit on them. Okay, so the green grass represents the believers that are consecrated to God. It represents the people in the church. The trees represent different parishes and dioceses throughout the world. The ones with fruit are the ones that are bearing fruit. At the end of the path, there was a clearing. In the middle of it was a large white house. I understand this to be St. Peter's. The words "place of refuge" were spoken to me, but interiorly, the house had 3 large rectangle-shaped doors, but translucent like windows. Above each door was a triangle-shaped arch. Okay, so the place of refuge is the church. To the right of this house, I saw a smaller one. It was smaller than the first and seemed more simple. It was also long and slim compared to the other that was more square. So if you look at St. Peter's Basilica, there's a small building on the side, and I didn't really even notice this until I began to pray about this and kind of look into where I felt the Lord was leading me with it. It had a wooden path with a rail that ran in front of it. It seemed to be on stilts or somehow higher up than the first, yet at the same time equal. Okay, this represents the authority of the papacy. Now, I will say that also in this, that the balcony or the stilts were very rickety, and this represents the undermining of the papacy. I saw a young boy walking on this rail, this balcony, if you will. It seemed to me he was looking for something that was lost. Okay, and this represented, I believe, his faith. When he passed by one of the doors, the smaller house, it opened quickly. A man who was tall, sinister, and evil in appearance came out of the open door, grabbed the boy, and pulled him into the house, slamming the door behind him. I was made to know that the boy was to be killed in some kind of child sacrifice or satanic ritual. This represents the people that are in the church that want to destroy the faith from within of the little children, of the believer. I saw evil and wickedness begin to creep out of the smaller house and into the larger one in the form of black translucent smoke that moved and acted like water. I seemed to be aware of demonic figures moving in the smoke, but was unable to see them clearly. They were there, yet subtle, and hidden to some degree. Okay, this represents the subtlety in which this is being done. It's later on I would read Anne Catherine Emmerich, and she talked about the little black man in Rome that was, facilitating all this, and people were doing his bidding without even realizing what they were doing. The evil was pure without even a hint of goodness. I could smell it like death, sense it, and feel it. I was petrified with fear. It was as if one got too close, this smoke would pull the life from the soul, even against the soul's will. There are no words to describe this sensation. They do not exist in the human vocabulary. It was personified evil. It was Lucifer. Later on, I would read Our Lady of Akita, that the work of Satan will enter the church in such a way that people will see bishop against bishop and priest against priest. I would later hear a pope say the smoke of Satan has entered the church. And then another pope ask us to pray that he's protected from the wolves. And then another pope, Pope Francis, say an elegant demon has entered the church. All echoing the words of Our Lady of Akita. As the black smoke crept into the cracks and crevices of the larger house, I was led to the rear of it. There, from the bottom of the hill, I could see that the smoke from the smaller house was continuing to make its way into the larger house and was pouring out of the back of the house in the form of a great black army. Our Lady and our Lord right now are gathering that counter army. Closer to me, at the bottom of the hill, was another army. This one was white. They were making their way up the hill towards the large house. As I looked at them, the word saints was given to me. I was given the understanding that the bigger house belonged to them. I don't think I need to explain this. The white army was small in number and were making their way up the hill to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The dark army was pouring out of the back of the house and coming down the hill in huge numbers and with great fury, anger, and hate. This is something to watch for. I've said the greatest persecutions will come from those within the church. The side that turns violent against the other, I mean physically violent against the other, is the side that you don't want to be on. They seem to be physically bigger than the average man. Both armies were armed with medieval weapons, swords, knives, lances, hatchets, and maces. As they clashed, the black army almost immediately began to overwhelm the white, chasing them down and putting them to the sword. What was strange is that when one of the white knights fell, the dark knight that slew him would stop fighting, pause, and pick up the fallen white knight's weapon and would somehow twist it or refashion it into some other type of weapon. He would then begin to wield this new weapon against another white knight that had yet to fall. The weapon still resembled its original form, but was somehow different or twisted. With every white knight that fell, the enemy would pause and do this. It happened repeatedly and quicker every time it happened. The more often it happened, the more powerful the dark army seemed to become. The black army seemed to prefer the white army's weapons to their own. And I was made to know that the white army's weapons were religious in nature. Okay, I understand this to be doctrine, or what Anne Catherine Emmerich talked about as a concession being demanded. As the white army began to retreat, they began to fall in great numbers. The enemy, this represents the final persecution or passion of the church. The enemy coming down the hill represented that they will come from the north. I would point out what's happening in Germany right now. They're apostatizing. When I was given this understanding, I heard the Blessed Mother speak to me. She spoke softly, but her words were extremely clear. She spoke to me these words: "The Holy Ones shall fall by the sword of faith." And the vision ended immediately on these words. So to me, these things are very clear. I don't think there should be any confusion about what's happening. Stay true to church doctrine, stay true to church teaching, stay obedient to the magisterium. I'm going to share with you real quickly. Well, maybe I'll do this in the next video. May God bless you. May he keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and grant you his peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.